Every ice cube that drops into these 8 bottles strips them of the exact characteristics you paid hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars to taste. And the bartender pouring it never warns you. 8 whiskeys getting murdered nightly by a habit nobody questions. We're talking liquid that took 12, 15, 18, sometimes 25 years of patience to build, dismantled in under a minute by frozen water cubes meant for soda. The industry won't say a word, because ice sells more rounds and dulls the palate enough that you can't tell when they pour you the cheaper stock. Number 1 on this list is the bottle most commonly destroyed by ice in American bars right now. And once you hear which one, you'll wince thinking about every single time you let them ruin it for you. Here's what most people never get told. Ice doesn't just chill whiskey, it restructures it. Cold suppresses the volatile aromatic compounds that carry flavor, while melting cubes dilute the spirit past the point distillers spent years calibrating. With ordinary 40% rail bourbon, that doesn't matter much. With the 8 bottles below, it's a quiet kind of cultural vandalism. Number 8. Eagle Rare 10 Year. This is Buffalo Trace's hand-selected single barrel program. Bottled at 90 proof, with a current retail somewhere around $40 to $55 when you can find it sitting on a shelf, which is rarely. Allocated, hunted, traded, and sometimes flipped on secondary markets for triple. Then dumped into a rocks glass with 3 cubes from the well freezer. The whole point of Eagle Rare is the barrel character. Each bottle reportedly comes from a single cask, which means subtle variation. Expressive oak, a soft caramelized fruit nose that opens like dried cherries left in a warm kitchen. There's a delicate honeyed mid-palate, a whisper of leather, a flicker of toasted brioche underneath, and a finish that lingers with toasted almond skin and a faint cola nut warmth. Pour it neat at 65 Fahrenheit, and the glass throws aroma the moment you bring it under your nose. Drop 2 cubes in, and within 30 seconds, the glass smells like cold metal and dilute caramel, nothing more. The chemistry, in plain English, looks like this. Volatile esters and lactones, the molecules that carry fruit, vanilla, and oak signals, need a certain temperature to lift off the surface of the liquid into your nose. Drop the temperature too low, and they stay locked in solution. Tasters consistently report that around 55 to 65 Fahrenheit appears to be the sweet spot for bourbon of this proof. Ice pulls Eagle Rare down toward 38, then dilutes it from 90 proof to roughly 70 proof within 5 minutes. Research suggests cis whiskey lactone, the compound responsible for that classic coconut and oak signature in American oak bourbons, becomes notably less perceptible below about 50 Fahrenheit. You're now drinking a watery, muted version of a bottle people stand in line for. What to do instead? Pour it neat into a tulip glass at room temperature. Let it open for 2 minutes. If the heat bothers you, add 3 drops of room temperature spring water from a pipette. Never tap, the chlorine flattens the oak. That's it. No cubes, no stones, no theater. Number 7. Hibiki Harmony. Suntory's flagship blend in the American market, currently retailing somewhere in the $110 to $150 range, sometimes higher when allocations tighten. The bottle alone is a piece of design history, 24 facets representing the Japanese seasons, a quiet kind of artistry that the liquid is supposed to mirror. 43% ABV, no age statement, but built from malt, and grain whiskeys aged in Japanese Mizunara oak, American oak, and sherry casks. The harmony in the name is not marketing fluff. This is a blend engineered for layered subtlety. Sandalwood, white peach, a faint incense note from the Mizunara, hints of yuzu zest and green tea leaf, a clean grain finish that fades like steam off a hot teacup. The aromatics are paper thin and gorgeous. They're also catastrophically fragile. Drop ice into Hibiki Harmony, and you get something close to expensive vodka with vague honey notes. The peach disappears first, the Mizunara incense second, the floral lift right after. In my experience, Mizunara's signature sandalwood note appears to be among the most temperature-sensitive aromatics in any whiskey category. Once chilled below about 50 Fahrenheit, it simply stops presenting. Research suggests Japanese blended whiskeys built on lower proof, delicate aromatic profiles, lose detectable aromatic complexity faster than higher proof American spirits when chilled. You paid for the harmony. Ice removes the music. Pour hibiki at room temperature in a small Glencairn or a thin-walled wine glass. Never a heavy rocks tumbler. The thick rim fights the nose. Swirl gently. Breathe before sipping. If it must be cold, chill the empty glass in the freezer for 90 seconds first, instead of cooling the liquid. The glass warms quickly enough to release aromatics while still feeling cool to the lip. Number 6. Highland Park 18-Year. The Orkney Distillery's flagship, sitting in the 250 to 320 range these days, depending on which Viking-themed packaging refresh you find. 43% ABV, matured predominantly in first fill and refill sherry-seasoned European oak, with a signature gentle Orkney peat, heather, not iodine, that makes Highland Park unlike anything else in Scotch. This is one of the most carefully balanced single malts on the planet. The nose pours dark honey, dried apricot, faint smouldering heather, beeswax, and a hint of orange peel rubbed between fingers. The palate develops in waves: sherried fruit, soft smoke, baking spice, walnut oil, and a closing note of cocoa nib. 18 years in cool maritime climate to build that interplay, and the entire structure rests on the smoke and sherry being in conversation, not competition. Here's the thing about peat and ice. Cold doesn't just suppress aromatics, it changes their order of arrival. Tasters consistently report that chilled peated whiskey tends to push the smoke forward while burying the sherried fruit, throwing the balance off. The phenols carrying the heather smoke are stable down to near freezing. The sherry-derived furfural and dried fruit esters appear to drop off sharply below 55 Fahrenheit. Highland Park 18 turns from a complex tapestry into something that tastes vaguely smoky and vaguely sweet with no architecture between them. In my assessment, this represents one of the saddest things you can do with $300. Drink it neat in a copita or tulip. Add a single drop of water. If you absolutely cannot bear room temperature, use one large 2-inch ice sphere, the kind that melts at roughly 1/4 the rate of standard cubes, and finish the pour within 10 minutes before the dilution crosses the line. Number 5. Weller 12-Year. Buffalo Trace's wheated bourbon, the same mash bill family as the Pappy line, technically retailing around $50 to $70 when you spot it, but routinely reselling at 3 to 5 times. That thanks to a decade of allocation chaos. 90 proof, no chill filtration on certain releases, deep amber color from real barrel time rather than additives. The wheated mash bill is the entire reason Weller has a cult. Wheat replaces rye as the secondary grain, which softens the spice and lets the corn sweetness sit forward, supported by a bready, almost pastry-like richness. The nose pours warm pecan pie, baked apple, brown butter, faint orange marmalade, and a back note of toasted graham. The palate carries through with maple glazed walnut, a pillow of soft vanilla custard, a slight cinnamon stick warmth, and a finish that stays warm and slightly nutty for almost a minute. Ice on Weller 12 is like throwing a wet blanket over a fireplace. The pastry notes vanish. The pecan turns to flat sweetness. The finish, which is the entire reason connoisseurs hunt. This bottle gets cut from 60 seconds to maybe 10. The reason appears to be that wheated bourbons rely on softer, lower intensity aromatic compounds than rye-forward bourbons, so they have less to spare when cold suppresses what's there. What's especially frustrating is how often I see this bottle ordered on the rocks at hotel bars by people who have no idea what they're holding. Listen, if someone hands you a Weller 12 pour and asks if you want ice, the answer is no, every single time. A small splash of mineral water at room temperature, half a teaspoon at most, opens it up beautifully. That's the only intervention it needs. Glencairn, or a small brandy snifter, never a heavy old-fashioned glass. Number 4. Lagavulin 16-Year. The Islay Heavyweight from Diageo, currently. In the 110 to 140 range, 43% ABV, 16 years in refill American oak. The peat here is the loud kind, maritime, medicinal, with iodine, brine, smoldering tar rope, and something almost vegetal underneath, like wet bracken after rain. People assume peated Scotch is bulletproof. Big flavors, surely they survive ice. They don't. The peat survives. The everything else doesn't. Lagavulin 16's quiet genius is the citrus and dark sweetness running underneath the smoke. Preserved lemon, dark muscovado, a faint salt-cured fig, a whisper of espresso crema, and a minty cooling note on the finish that arrives almost a full minute after you swallow. Cold suppresses every one of those counterweights. What you get with ice is just smoke and salt, with the volume turned down and the structure gone. The chemistry makes this worse than people realize. Phenolic compounds, the molecules carrying peat character, are relatively cold stable. Esters and aldehydes carrying fruit and floral notes are not. Drop the temperature, and you've created a chemistry experiment in selective destruction. The peat shouts louder, while everything that balanced it goes silent. This appears to be why so many people who think they dislike Lagavulin tried it once on the rocks and never went back. They tasted a caricature, not the whiskey. Pour Lagavulin neat in a tulip. Add 1 teaspoon of water if the alcohol bite distracts you. Most experienced Islay drinkers I know add a small amount as a matter of routine. Sip slowly. The whole point is the conversation between fire and fruit, and ice ends that conversation in under a minute. Now we get to the bottles where ice isn't just regrettable, it's offensive. The next 4 are whiskies, built on a level of nuance, age, and craftsmanship, where adding frozen water to them is closer to vandalism than preference. Number 3, Buffalo Trace Antique Collection Picks, specifically George T. Stagg and William LaRue Weller, the barrel-proof releases that come out once a year and disappear within hours. Original retail somewhere around $125 for Stagg, slightly higher for Weller. Real-world prices on the secondary market routinely hit $800 to $1,200 per bottle. Both are uncut, unfiltered, sometimes pushing past 140 proof. I want you to think about that for a moment. Someone paid roughly $1,000 for a bottle that took 15 plus years to mature, then poured it over ice from the same machine used for the lemonade. I've watched it happen in steakhouses. The first thing ice does to a barrel-proof whiskey is something almost cruel. Because the proof is so high, you actually can dilute it with water. That's a legitimate way to drink barrel-strength bourbon. But ice melts unevenly and cools the liquid past the optimal range, so you get suppression and dilution at the same time, instead of just dilution. The result is that the dense fudge, espresso, charred oak, and dark cherry character of Stagg, or the rich pastry and dark honey core. Sauv William LaRue Weller, with its toasted pecan, candied yam, and saddle leather backbone, gets dismantled in stages while you watch. What to do instead is genuinely simple. Proof down, don't cool down. Pour about half an ounce. Add water by the drop, not by the cube. 5 drops at a time. Swirl, smell, taste. Find the proof point, where it opens up, usually around 105 to 115 for these. That's your sweet spot. Ice cannot replicate that precision because ice keeps adding water indefinitely. You can stop adding drops. You can't stop a melting cube. Use a Glencairn, never a tumbler. The narrow rim funnels the heavier aromatics from a high-proof spirit straight to your nose without burning your sinuses raw. Number 2, Macallan 18-year Sherry Oak. The Sherry Bomb icon, currently in the 400 to 550 range for the standard release, 43% ABV, 18 years in first fill Spanish Sherry Oak from Jerez. The defining Macallan profile: dried fig, antique furniture polish, raisin, dark chocolate, a thread of clove and cinnamon, a flash of orange marmalade on toasted sourdough, all wrapped around a deep, almost varnish-like oak depth. This bottle was engineered, literally, around the interaction between aged spirit and Oloroso seasoned oak. Decades of cooperage relationships with Spanish bodegas, casks selected by hand. The flavor profile is an aromatic argument that took 18 years to settle, and the dried fruit and oak resin notes are temperature sensitive in ways that punish the colder you go. Ice on Macallan 18 doesn't just mute, it actively distorts. Tasters consistently report that cold accentuates a slight sulfur note that exists in low concentration in many sherry cask whiskies, undetectable at proper serving temperature, more obvious when chilled. So you've taken a bottle whose flavor is dried fig wrapped in mahogany and turned it into something that smells faintly of struck matches and tastes like watered-down sweetness for $500. Pour it neat in a copita at room temperature. Let it sit for 2 minutes, 3 if the room is cool. Add a single drop of water if needed, no more. The bottle does its own work. Your job is to not interfere. If the room is genuinely warm, place the bottle in a cool cabinet, never the fridge. Refrigeration appears to suppress the fig and resin notes for hours after the bottle returns to room temperature. Number 1. Pappy Van Winkle, 15-year. The most common ice-related whiskey crime in America. Original retail around $120. Real-world price anywhere from $1,200 to $3,000 depending on the year, the market, and how desperate the buyer is. Wheated mash bill, 15 years in oak, 107 proof, made under contract at Buffalo Trace from stock laid down a decade and a half ago. Pappy 15 is, in my experience, the single most ordered premium pour on the rocks in American steakhouses and hotel bars. Bartenders see it on the back bar list. Customers point at the green wax, and someone asks for ice without thinking. What gets murdered in that glass is one of the most layered wheated bourbons ever bottled. A nose that opens with caramelized banana, butterscotch root, faint maraschino cherry, almond skin, dried tobacco leaf, and a trace of leather-bound book. The palate carries baked apple, a deep buttery oak, candied orange peel, bittersweet cocoa, a flicker of dark cherry preserves, and a long, warm finish that fades with toasted coconut, and a soft pepper warmth along the back of the tongue. Ice in a Pappy 15 glass does 3 things at once. It locks down the volatile aromatics, so the nose collapses to maybe 30% of its potential. It dilutes a 107 proof spirit toward 80 proof in under 5 minutes, blurring the structure. And it suppresses the long finish, which is arguably the entire reason this bottle has the cult it has. So what do you do instead? Pour it neat in a Glencairn. Wait 3 minutes for it to breathe. Add water by the drop until it opens, usually 3 to 5 drops. Is the entire intervention needed? Never more than 10. Sip it slowly. Let the finish carry. If you absolutely insist on something cold in the glass, use a single large hand-cut ice sphere only and drink the pour within 8 minutes. But understand, you are still losing roughly a third of what the bottle was built to deliver. Here's a question worth sitting with. How many bottles on this list have you ordered with ice in the last year? How many times did the bartender hand you ice without asking? And you didn't push back because you didn't want to seem fussy. The bottles on this list represent decades of accumulated craftsmanship. Peat balanced with sherry, wheat softening corn, Mizunara whispering through grain, single barrels selected by hand. Ice undoes that work in seconds. A few quick rules on glass etiquette before we close. Always choose a vessel with an inward tapering rim. Glencairn, Copita, Tulip, even a small wine glass in a pinch. Avoid heavy old-fashioned tumblers for anything over $50 a bottle, no matter how cinematic they look. Hold the glass by the base or stem, not the bowl, so your hand doesn't warm the spirit past its sweet spot. Pour roughly an ounce, never more, so the surface area to liquid ratio lets the aromatics work. Let it sit. Smell with your mouth slightly open, so the alcohol vapor doesn't burn the receptors before the flavor compounds reach them. Add water by drops from a pipette or a teaspoon, never by guess. And if a bartender lifts the ice scoop, without asking, stop them. Politely, but stop them. A simple, neat, please, with a small glass of room temperature water on the side, handles it without friction every single time. And most experienced bartenders will respect the order immediately. The water on the side is your control. You decide the dilution, drop by drop on your timeline. You don't have to drink every whiskey neat to be a serious drinker. You just have to know which bottles deserve your respect, which ones reward patience, and which ones you should never, under any circumstances, hand back to a bartender holding a scoop of cubes. Pour it warm. Add water by the drop. Choose the right glass. Taste what you actually paid for.